Hello, and welcome to a new edition of True Audio Files. My name's Jim Carter. So, before I get started deep into my video for the week, I basically just wanted to go over some of the things that I got this week new for me, and some are new in general. So, actually, I think they all are, but I apologize for the glare on this one, but this is Maceo and All the King's Men doing their own thing. For those of you who don't know, it's Maceo Parker. And for those of you who don't know who Maceo Parker is, he is a saxophone player. And he's been in James Brown's band, which that's where he got his start. He did his own thing, I think, for a while in the 70s and into the 80s. But then he also became associated with Prince later on in, I believe, the 90s and 2000s a little bit. And so this was basically a collection of former James Brown band members and some other people that made a record. I think this one is from 1970, I believe. I can't remember. But anyways, it's a reissue, and I saw it. I've never heard it, and it was one of those impulse buys. I wanted to give it a try. So next one up is Speak No Evil by Wayne Shorter, a new classic vinyl series reissue. Excited to check that one out, but not quite as excited as I am about this one right here, as this is Stevie Ray Vaughan, Couldn't Stand the Weather, Mo-Fi, One Step. So basically, and one other kind of cool thing about it is I got a pretty low number too, and very excited to hear that one. Haven't even, as you can see, haven't even had a chance to open it yet. It came in yesterday, but I was still finishing up my research for this video. And then the last one here is the best of Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. So for those of you that don't know much about it, Peter Green was one of the founding members of Fleetwood Mac, and he left the band way before Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks joined, and they were much more blues-based back then. So pretty cool stuff, and actually Black Magic Woman, which is a Santana hit, was actually written by, I believe, by Peter Green. Was definitely done by Fleetwood Mac back when he was with the band. And also Green Manalishi, which is a Judas Priest song that got popular, is actually a Fleetwood Mac song, but I believe, again, a Peter Green written Fleetwood Mac song. So, anyway, those are my 4 pickups for this week. Not much in terms of new music that came out that I was interested in. So that's basically what was on the agenda this week. And now for the agenda for this video. I am going to do part 2 of my video for the Queen box set sound quality shootout. So there's not quite as many albums on this video that I get to compare, because basically the last I think 3 or 4 albums I actually didn't own on vinyl, so I really didn't have a whole lot to compare on those ones. I didn't have anything to compare on those ones. So, but the first few I had several, because they're some of my favorite Queen albums. So the first one that I want to get started with here is The Game by Queen, obviously. This one, of course it's by Queen. Anyway, this is the reissue version. Now, again, I'm going to be going through my notes when I'm going through this, so you might see some weird pauses and breaks and things like that, just because there's just too much stuff that I'm not going to remember that I'm going to have to refer back to on my notes. So anyways, I had a lot of different versions of this album, as you can see here, just because it is one of my favorite Queen albums. But not my, I don't know if it's my favorite. But anyway, I have these two are early US pressings that I have. Actually, another early US pressing. And then I have an early Greek pressing. I'm pretty sure it's not a first, because to my knowledge, although it might be different in Greece, all the early pressings were that shiny color or shiny foil front that you saw. And then I also have these two, which are basically, they're actually just the single black versions of The Game, the reissue. And I bought these before I bought the box set. Funny story about this, though, is I bought this one after I bought this one. not knowing I had this one. But the one thing that it made me realize is the current reissues that are available, the half-speed master ones, because I want to clarify and set the record, well, not set the record straight, but make sure you're aware that there are two different versions of these albums available right now. There's the half-speed mastered ones, and then there's some other version, which I'm not sure where those originated from, because they're not half-speed mastered. My understanding is they're not pressed as well, and they may even be using an old mastering. They may not even be the current remasters, which are really done well. But anyways, the other thing that I found interesting is this one was probably bought, I don't know, a year or two ago, maybe. And it's pressed in Germany and at Optimal, just like the box set is. But this one, which again is something I picked up, I want to say I personally picked it up a month or two ago, was pressed in Canada. So kind of weird. And the Canadian one didn't have quite the quality in terms of the pressing as the German Optimal ones did. So bear that in mind when potentially looking to purchase these. So basically, we're essentially going with three different versions. I'm making an assumption here, but maybe someone can correct me, but I believe that kind of going forward, at least from, I want to say from News of the World on, I believe that they actually used the same stampers in UK and the US. It's just a question of which ones were pressed better. So sound quality wise, they should be the same, but please, if you know anything different, please correct me if I'm wrong. So essentially, I will start off just by saying that the Greek one sounded awful. I haven't done my research, but there's a possibility that it's a bootleg, but I haven't done the research, so I don't know that for a fact, but it definitely did not sound anywhere near as good as all the other versions that I listened to here. Now, basically, with this reissue and all the other reissues that I talk about here, I'm going to kind of reiterate this point because I made this point in the last video, and it holds true throughout the rest of this video also, is that virtually all of the reissues are going to have a little bit more lower mids and a little bit more upper bass response. So that's been basically true across the board. Now, whether it makes it better or not, that's what I'm here to talk about and see if there's any other differences that I pick up on. So basically, same thing holds true on this one. Early US one definitely has great deep bass and even has a great sound stage definition in terms of depth. But in the case of the reissue, it has more bass, and the pressing is better. And I tried all three of those different US pressings. Every single one of them was definitely noisier than the reissue, and it didn't have anything to do with condition, because I have a couple of them where it just looked visually in pristine condition, like hadn't even been played. So it's not I don't think it's because of wear and tear. I think it's just the pressing quality. Now, I'd be curious to see if the UK had that. But final verdict on the game, slight recommendation of the reissue over the early US pressing. And completely recommended over the early Greek pressing. I would not even wish that on my worst enemy. It's probably like a third or fourth generation tape if it's not a bootleg, so it was that bad. On this one here, I really didn't have, the next one, I really didn't have a whole lot to go on, mainly because it's not really an album that I typically classify as a Queen album, even though they do, because they did write it technically, but, and it has nothing to do with anything against where it came from, and that is the Flash Gordon soundtrack. But basically, there's just not a lot of actual songs. It's more a lot of instrumentals and things like that. But this is the reissue. And then I have an early, if not first, US pressing. Now, the one thing that I was kind of, I don't want to say taken aback by, but I was surprised because the box set's been usually pretty good and meticulous about doing all the little things right. This actually has an embossed cover. It's hard to see here, but the reissue didn't, so I was kind of surprised about that. I would have thought that the reissue would have as well. On this one, kind of like what I was with the game, soundstage virtually identical. But the lower mid-range, upper mid-bass was definitely better on this one, and it really made a big difference, not only in just the vocals in general, but also from the sound clips from the movie, because without that extra lower mid-range, upper bass response, it really sounded tinny and awful, but it really brought out a little bit more richness to the sound, and sounded much better by adding those frequencies into the remaster. So again, edge to the remaster, the reissue on this one as well. So next up, definitely one of my favorites, I think just because I used to play it as a kid so much, is Hot Space. So this is the reissue. Oh, and by the way, I'm just going to show this again quickly, but you can go and research it for yourself if you want. But kind of the cool thing about these reissues in this box set is they come in different colors. So you can see colored vinyl, I should say. So like the Hot Space was blue, the Flash Gordon was yellow, the game was silver. And basically I basically only have a couple versions of this one. And this one is mainly because I'm not sure what happened to... I used to have this on vinyl when I was a kid, and I could promise you that it was in rough shape, and maybe that's why I got rid of it, because I don't seem to have it anymore. But I have a somewhat beat up UK copy, but I ended up finding a near mint first UK pressing that I bought, so that's what this one is that I got a few years ago. As you can see, it's got EMI on it. Basically the US ones were Elektra, and the UK ones are EMI, and that's the case for almost all of them, if not all of them, across the board here when it comes to the originals. And then I have also, again, a black version of the reissue that I got back a few years ago that is basically the same cutting, just a black pressing instead of the colored pressing of the reissue. So that one, again, is pressed in Germany. So this one was kind of interesting because in a lot of the cases, I do have a slight preference for, well, in general, I typically have a preference for more bass, and I do like good lower mid-range. And so there'll be a lot of cases where I will like the reissues because of these things. And in this case, it was a little odd because the reissues seemed to have too much upper bass, especially, and it's really held true because Hot Space, if you don't know, has a lot of very prominent bass guitar and like bass synth things going on in it, and because of that, it's really almost gave it a bloated feel to the tracks. And also when listening to the vocals and things like that, because the bass is so prominent, bass guitar that is, and bass synths, it really kind of muffled the voice a little bit, in my opinion, in this reissue. One of the ones specifically, I think it was Body Language, really was a good evidence of that, where it was really quite a bit more bass than the original ones. Now, again, I usually really like a lot of bass, and I think maybe during certain circumstances, maybe I will prefer listening to the reissue because of that. But I would say overall, if you're talking from a audiophile sound quality aspect of it, I have to give a slight edge to the UK because of that exaggerated upper bass. So, because the UK still had great deep bass, it just didn't have as much of the upper bass. Anyway, so edge to the first UK pressing of that one. So that's the first one we've had of those in a little while. So next up, we've got Queen of the Works. This one was an album that I had as well. Didn't listen to it as much. I think I had it on cassette or maybe even CD, but I don't think so. I think I probably had it. I could have had it on CD, but I think it was on cassette that I had this. And I did listen to it quite often. And, you got Radio Gaga on it, and there's a couple others that are decent. But overall, it wasn't one of my favorite albums, but this is the reissue. It has like a red colored vinyl. And then I have an early US pressing, which actually this one has an EMI logo on it, but it also has a Capitol logo on it as well. And I think they transitioned to the new label, to Capitol in the U.S., and who owns EMI in the U.S., and I think they were owned by, or they're the same company in the U.K. as well, though I don't know if there's a Capitol label in the UK. But anyways, so that was the US, and this is the early UK version of it, where it just has EMI on the label on the bottom there. So on this one, the US and the UK, I believe they both had sterling stampers on them, so I'm quite certain that it's a very good probability that they were the same stampers and same mastering, same cut. And they sounded identical, and there was basically no difference between them. And on this one, I would say that the upper bass and lower mid-range edition on the reissue gave this one a better sound quality overall. One of the other things that I thought, and maybe it was just my imagination, but it seemed to me that the reissue may have been even a little bit more dynamic than the early pressings. It's very possible. And when that happens, you tend to get a little bit of a deeper sound stage, which is something that I thought I picked up on the reissue. So the reissue definitely sounded better on this one. And it was slight, but I wouldn't say very slight. It was definitely something that I would prefer. And especially with the added dynamics and just the richness of overall sound, I would say that overall, I would probably give at least a slight preference to the vocal sound on all the reissues compared to the originals, because the vocals do sound a little bit thin because of the lack of that lower mid-range that they don't have compared to the reissues. But on that one, I would go with the reissue in this particular case. So up next here, we will go with Queen, of course, obviously, A Kind of Magic. This is kind of a cool album. You know, you got One Vision and A Kind of Magic, and there's a couple of others that are really good. 1 Year of Love. So pretty cool album. I love the artwork on it as well. It's kind of fun. So that's the reissue. The reissue, if we can look at here, is orange. So kind of a cool color. And then I have here an early UK, I think first pressing, but don't quote me on that one because I'm not 100% certain. But it's definitely an early UK pressing. They started having barcodes back in the late 80s when this came out. I think this was 86. So in this one, I do give the edge to the original UK. And it's mainly because it seemed like the deep bass was more prevalent on the original pressing. And even though you have more of the kind of the mid bass sound on the reissue, it just seemed again that I liked the deeper bass that the original had. Where I noticed it most was on the title track, where the deeper bass was there. It definitely seemed to be more obvious to me on that specific track. But it was kind of weird, you know, because yeah, I'd say overall that the reissue probably has more bass as a whole. The original has more deeper bass, which I like the deeper bass because it kind of keeps like a deeper, tighter bass. Is kind of the thing that I like going after. Although I like the little punch too that they tend to get from some of the upper bass. So, but anyway, overall I give that nod to the UK, early UK pressing. So I will show you the rest of the albums, but I did not do a shootout on these ones just because I don't have other pressings of them. But you've got Queen the Miracle, obviously, that one there. You have Innuendo, and then the last album with Freddie Mercury on it, Made in Heaven. All those sounded really good, although as you got later on, I did notice kind of a little bit more of a digital feel to them, and they seemed a little bit more flat. It's just one of those things that I tend to pick up on when I'm sitting in the sweet spot of my system. But still sounded good. You know, they had a good EQ to them, the typical EQ that I got from all the other ones. They just didn't, you know, I'm not as big of a fan of these albums either, although Innuendo's not bad. And I really like the artwork on Innuendo. The one thing I will make a point of on Innuendo too is all of the artwork is kind of is glossy as opposed to the rest of the cover is matte, so it's kind of a cool effect on it. And so I really like the artwork on that one, and there's a couple of songs I really like on there. So, but overall, the last three Queen albums are probably not my favorites, so that's why I never got them on vinyl. So, and I think they're also a little bit harder to come by just because of, number one, I don't think they sold as much, and they came out in either the very late 80s or early 90s where vinyl was not as prevalent. So, going to be a little harder to find. But so anyways, that is all of the Shootout reviews and A and B comparisons I have. But when I say overall, I actually totaled it all up and compared which ones were better overall. And the early pressings got 5 wins, if you will, and the reissues got 6. So overall, the reissues actually won out a little bit. And none of them were terrible, you know, and I want to stress that right off the bat. They all sounded amazing. But one of the other cool things and amazing things is the book that comes with the vinyl box set. So, you know, you've got some awesome pictures. You got some old thought lost sheet music and lyrics for some of the albums, and it really goes into some detail about the singles and the album itself, and some cool concert photos and some pictures of the 45s that came out as well. So very cool book, and I would say that, you know, for someone who doesn't have a lot of these albums in great shape as a US or UK pressing, I definitely think it's worth it. And if you're just a big Queen fan in general, you will definitely not be disappointed by this box set. It's really, really good. So I strongly recommend it. And, you know, like I said, none of the reissues sounded terrible. None of them sounded bad. All of these shootouts, it was neck and neck, and it was almost a flip the coin to see which one's better. And I would say overall, like I had mentioned before, if I were basing my opinion solely on the vocal tone, the EQ on the vocals, I would say that the reissues win every time, because they definitely were richer, almost, and basically more natural sounding. So I would probably go with those just on that alone. You will not be disappointed. So that's my video for this week. Please, if you have any comments, I'd love to hear them. I'd love to get your take. If you have any of these, or if you have the box set and you've done some comparisons like I have, I'd love to hear what your input is on that. And stay tuned next week, because my guess is I'll be doing a sound quality shootout for that. And excited to check that out and do some comparisons to some of the albums, some of the earlier versions of that I have. But, you know, if you liked what you see here, please hit that like button. If you want to see more of my videos, please subscribe and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to know when more of my videos come out, please hit that alert notification bell. So that's it for this week. You guys have a great rest of the week, and I will see you on the flip side next week. Have a great day.